They say every man has a moment that splits his life in two, before and after. Mine came the day I bought a broken nun for $300 I didn't even have. Before we get too deep in the dust and fire, if this kind of story speaks to something you hit that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe. There's more where this came from. And some stories. They only make sense when you follow them all the way to the end. I didn't go to Millfield looking to save anyone. I didn't believe in salvation back then. Not after what I'd lost. Not after what I'd done. I went to town to sell a few head of cattle and drink away the cold creeping in my bones. But fate doesn't knock on your door. It throws you into the fire, kicks it shut behind you, and waits to see if you'll crawl out or burn. What I saw on that auction block wasn't just a woman in chains. It was a choice. And making it would drag me through gunfire guilt and a war against men who wore crosses like badges and set fire to the world in God's name. Her name was Grace, and I'd have to decide if her past made her unworthy of saving or if mine made me unworthy of trying. This is the story of fire faith and what comes after the ashes. Stay with me. I didn't come to Millfield to play hero. I came to sell cattle and get the hell out before sundown. But life has a way of dragging you into fires you thought you'd long stopped feeling the heat from. The square was already thick with dust and sweat by the time I arrived, the kind of heat that sticks to your ribs. I hitched my horse, tipped my hat low, and kept to the shade. That's when I saw the platform, and her. She was standing up there like a broken relic of some forgotten faith. Torn robes, barefoot. A crudely written sign hung from her neck, Grace Lark. Obedient. The crowd jeered, laughing like it was just another livestock auction, only this wasn't a mare they were selling. This was a woman, what used to be a nun, from the look of her being traded like she'd lost the right to be human. What am I? Bid the auctioneer barked, grinning through gold teeth. Clean-spirited and trained for discipline. The bile rose in my throat, but I said nothing. I don't speak much these days. You lose the habit after burying your wife and child under frozen dirt after watching the world chew up anything soft inside you. I'd promised myself I was done with caring. But then her eyes found mine. They weren't begging. They weren't even hopeful. Just tired. Quiet. But there was something beneath the exhaustion, dignity, I think. A kind of strength I didn't think existed anymore. $150, someone hollered. I knew that voice. Jed Crowley. Meanest son of a bitch this side of the dust pines, known for the way he broke horses and women with the same cold precision, going once the auctioneer crowed. I should have walked away. Hell, I tried. But my boots wouldn't move. Something cracked open in my chest like an old wound deciding to bleed again. 200, I said. The words tore out of me like a shot, loud and final. The crowd went still. Jed turned that ugly grin, twisting with surprise, then rage. 250, he spat, already reaching for his belt. I had 200 to my name, money meant for winter feed and boot leather. That bid wasn't just reckless, it was suicide. 220, I said, teeth clenched. People were murmuring now. This wasn't about money anymore. This was pride, history. Maybe even something close to redemption. 300? Jed sneered, stepping closer. You got that kind of coin ransom? Or you planning to trade memories? I reached into my coat, not for my gun, not yet. Just the roll of bills I had left, 200 flat. That's when Grace stepped forward and pulled something from her pocket, a gold cross wrapped in cloth, glinting with old rubies. This will cover the rest, she said. And just like that, I wasn't just a man buying a stranger's freedom. I was in it. All the way. They say every man's got a moment where he realizes he just stepped off the edge. For me, that moment came 10 minutes after I bought Grace Lark for $300 I didn't really have. I was still trying to make sense of it, her wrists bleeding from rope burns that cross she'd given up like it meant nothing, the way she looked at me, like I wasn't just another man with a price. But then I heard the hooves. 3 riders. Black robes. Moving like wolves in daylight. Grace saw them before I did. Her face went pale. Her fingers reached for her chest, where the cross used to hang, then curled into a fist instead. "We need to go," she said, quiet but sharp. "Now." "Friends of yours?" I asked, already knowing damn well they weren't. "No," she breathed. "That's Reverend Creed. And his followers." The name hit me like a pistol butt to the ribs. Silas Creed, the so-called man of God, who'd been leaving ashes in every town from here to the border. They said he preached fire and delivered it. "They burned my convent," Grace said, walking fast beside me. "Said we were living in sin. They called it purification." I didn't ask what she'd done. I didn't need to. Her voice was made of regret and something harder, something like survival. We cut 2 streets over, heading for the church, the real one, Father Boone's place. Grace said he was different, and I had to believe her. We didn't have many options. But then that voice came drifting in behind us, smooth, slow, and soaked in false holiness. "Grace Lark," Reverend Creed called, "you've led us on quite the journey. But the path ends here, child. Time to come home." Grace stumbled. I grabbed her elbow. "Keep walking," I muttered. "You don't understand," she whispered. "They don't kill fast. They cleanse, inch by inch." I didn't answer, just walked faster. We turned the corner and saw the church, whitewashed walls, tall bell tower. And for the first time that morning, I felt a flicker of hope. Then Creed's voice hit us again, closer now. "Your rescuer seems gallant. I wonder how noble he'll feel once he knows what you really are." Grace stopped. Her body stiffened like a struck chord. Creed dismounted and walked toward us, his hands loose by his sides. I could see the edges of steel beneath his robes. "Tell him, sister. Tell him what you did." Grace's voice was barely audible. "There was a fire. I didn't mean to start it. I just wanted to leave. I knocked over a candle. I didn't know it would spread." The air went still. People were gathering again, drawn by the scent of scandal. "She confesses," Creed said, smiling like the devil quoting scripture. "You see, friend, you've bought yourself a killer." My hand hovered near my Colt. I looked at Grace. Tears streaked her face, but her spine was still straight. She wasn't begging, she was bracing. And I knew right then I wasn't going to let them take her. Not alive? If you're still here, maybe this story is hitting somewhere close to the bone. Go ahead and hit that like button. It tells me you're riding with me. Leave a comment down below. Tell me what you would have done if you stood where I did. And if you want to see how far this fire spreads, subscribe to the channel. The worst is still coming. The church stood like a last breath of peace in a town about to choke on blood. I'd barely stepped into the square with Grace when I saw them, Creed's men, flanking him like black vultures. Their faces weren't godly. They were hard and scarred, the kind of men who used crosses to justify knives. Creed stopped 30 feet out, robes fluttering in the wind like flags before a funeral. His smile hadn't faded, not since he'd accused Grace of murder. "Tell me, friend," he called out. "What exactly do you think you've rescued?" I lifted my Colt just high enough to make my message clear. "A woman in trouble. That's enough." He tilted his head. "A woman, yes. But not the kind you're used to rescuing. Did she tell you about the man she was meeting? The one she planned to run away with before she burned down God's house?" Grace went still beside me. Her silence hit harder than any bullet. She was running from guilt. Creed continued. But sin always leaves a trail. Shut your damn mouth, I growled. Creed smiled like a man watching a match near dry brush. Touch a nerve. Before I could speak, another voice rang out behind us, low, calm, and full of iron. Enough. Father Boone stepped from the chapel door, shotgun cradled in his arms like scripture. Dust swirled around his feet like ghosts. I'd never seen a priest look more like a warrior. This is holy ground, Boone said. I won't have it desecrated by wolves wearing wool. Creed didn't even flinch. Sanctuary doesn't protect murderers, Father. Boone took one step forward. Sanctuary protects the broken, not the wicked who prey on them. More riders were closing in now. Creed had reinforcements, men with rifles strapped over black habits surrounding us like a net. Grace grabbed my arm. We need to run. There's no running, I told her, not anymore. Creed raised his hand, and one of his zealots drew his revolver and fired not at us, but at the church bell. The bullet struck bronze, sending a death knell over the square. No more sanctuary, Creed shouted. Let the fire begin. Boone didn't hesitate. His shotgun roared, and one of Creed's men dropped like a sack of sin. I shoved Grace behind the water trough and returned fire. The square exploded into chaos, bullets tearing wood, glass, and flesh. The townspeople screamed and scattered like cattle sensing a storm. Creed's men pressed forward. They didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like believers, ruthless, blind, and sure they were right. Boone moved like a man possessed, every shot deliberate, every step calculated. He'd been waiting for this day. But we were outnumbered. I could feel it tightening around us like a noose. Then came the smoke. Grace pointed back toward the chapel. They've set the church on fire. Of course they had. Creed didn't just want her. He wanted her cleansed. He wanted everything touched by her to burn. I looked at Grace. She was staring into the flames like she saw her own sins dancing inside them. We're not dying here, I told her. But truth was, I wasn't sure we wouldn't. Everything was burning, hope, truth, and the last place in town that still felt holy. But before I tell you how the fire turned, hit that like button if your heart's pounding like mine was that day. Drop a comment. What do you think should happen next? Subscribe to the channel because things are about to turn fast, violent, and unforgiving. And trust me, the next shot fired changes everything. The church burned behind us, and I swear I could hear it scream. The flames weren't roaring yet, just licking the walls like they were tasting. But it wouldn't take long. Fire's got a hunger to it, and Reverend Silas Creed had fed it well over the years. Grace stood at the top of the steps paralyzed. Smoke curled around her like a noose. "This is my fault," she whispered, her voice cracking. "All this death, all this fire, it follows me." "No," I said, reloading behind an overturned cart. "It follows them." "You didn't make them killers, Grace. They came that way." She looked like she wanted to believe me. But guilt's a stubborn thing. It doesn't care about facts, it just knows how to burrow in and stay warm. Gunfire snapped through the air. Boone was a few yards away, crouched behind the old water barrel, pumping his shotgun with a rhythm that felt like an old hymn. Methodical, steady, holy in a strange way. Creed, though he wasn't hiding. He walked through the square like some damn prophet bullets, whistling past his arms, out like he was welcoming martyrdom. Behind him, Jed Crowley had joined the fray, taking pot shots with a grin, white as the devil's grin. He'd found himself a cause, and that made him more dangerous than ever. We were boxed in. 6 of Creed's men, maybe more, and a crowd that didn't know whether to run or start chanting. They wanted blood. They just weren't sure whose yet. And then hoofbeats. A thunder of them, coming from the east. Creed heard it too. For the first time I saw something crack in those cold eyes of his. Riders poured over the ridge, Sheriff Carson and a dozen deputies, guns drawn, eyes sharp. They'd heard the fight from miles off and come riding like the damn cavalry. They didn't shoot, not yet. They didn't know who was who. Everyone on the ground, Carson shouted. First man who moves wrong gets buried right here. The square froze. Flames popped in the chapel doorway behind us, smoke rising thick. Then Boone did something bold. He stood up, slow, steady, shotgun still in his hands. Sheriff Carson, he called. These men in robes, they're the ones who burned San Benedito 7 years ago. Killed my whole parish in the name of their twisted gospel. Creed spat on the ground. Lies. We are God's will. Carson's eyes flicked between us. The church, the dead, the smoke. He turned to Creed. You ever set fire to a church? Reverend, I purify, Creed said, voice full of venom. She, he pointed to Grace, is the devil's whore. That was the wrong thing to say. Carson's rifle lifted, Boone's shotgun cocked, and my Colt was already drawn. We fired almost at once. Creed staggered, spun, and dropped robes spreading like burnt wings across the dirt. His men hesitated. Then they broke. Some ran. Some dropped their weapons and dropped to their knees. It was over. But the fire still burned. And Grace, standing there in the smoke, looked like a soul trying to decide whether it deserved to be saved. I walked to her, heart pounding like I'd just outrun the devil. It's done, I said. No, she replied, voice raw. It's just beginning. The smoke was still rising when the last of Creed's men were hauled off in chains. Some townsfolk stayed to watch. Others drifted away like people waking from a bad dream, unsure if what they'd seen was real. The fire was mostly out now, leaving behind a scorched skeleton of what used to be a house of God. Grace stood beside me, ash in her hair, hands trembling like she wasn't sure if she should hold a prayer or a pistol. I didn't touch her. Not yet. Some things need time before they can be held. Sheriff Carson gave me a nod, one of those hard, tired nods men like us use instead of thank yous. Boone'll stay in town. Help rebuild, he said. You too. Whatever you decide, I suggest, you do it far from here. He didn't say it to be cruel. He said it because he knew how folks were. They'd remember the gunfire and the fire and the nun who burned her own past to the ground. Forgiveness comes slow in small towns. When he left, Grace turned to me. Her voice was rough smoke and regret. What happens now? I looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't the same woman I'd seen on that platform. She wasn't just a runaway nun or woman with guilt stitched into her bones. She was a survivor. A sinner, maybe. But no worse than me. That depends, I said. You could find another convent. Some quiet corner of the world that still believes in saints. Her jaw tightened. I don't think I belong in holy places anymore. I nodded. Then maybe you belong somewhere honest instead. She tilted her head. Like where my ranch, I said. Ain't much. Just land, wind, and fences that don't fix themselves. But it's clean work. It's quiet. And I could use someone who knows how to fight. A faint smile ghosted across her lips. Why me? I took a breath. Because you didn't run when the fire started. Because you gave away your last tie to your old life to save a fool like me. Because someone like you knows what it means to rebuild something that's already burned down. She looked back at the church, what was left of it. The cross still stood blackened, but unbroken. I don't know anything about cattle, she said. I didn't know anything about grace, I replied. Guess we'll both be learning. 6 months later, Grace Lark became Maggie Ransom. We didn't talk about what happened in Millfield much. We didn't have to. It lived in the way we worked, the way we sat silent at sunset, and the way we both flinched at thunder. She taught kids to read under a tree that hadn't burned. I fixed fences and tried not to think too much. But some days when the light hit her hair just right and the world was still, I'd think maybe, just maybe, I'd finally started to believe again. Not in churches, not in preachers, but in people. What this story really means. This isn't just a tale about guns and fire. It's a story about the weight we carry and the choice to carry someone else's too. Colt Ransom is a broken man scarred by loss who thought redemption was something only found in Scripture, not real life. Grace Lark is a woman haunted by guilt running from her past and the men who use faith as a weapon. But when their paths collide, something unexpected happens, not a miracle, but a decision. He chooses to believe in her even when she no longer believes in herself. She chooses to fight for life even when it means facing the very flames she once caused. And together they prove something powerful, that redemption isn't about forgetting what you've done. It's about who you choose to be after. This story touches anyone who's ever felt too far gone, too damaged, or too late. It reminds us that sometimes salvation doesn't come from heaven. It comes from another broken soul standing beside you, saying, "I'm not leaving." That's what makes this story matter. That's what makes it human. Click on the next video. It's another tale of fire forgiveness and the kind of justice you don't find in courtrooms. Sometimes the next story is the one that finally makes you believe again.